All right, we've got a huge show on tap. Mike Goolsby joins to talk about how the Irish can make a run in the college football playoff this season, why Riley Leonard is an upgrade over Sam Hartman, what he expects from Al Golden's scheme in year 3, and a whole lot more. That's coming right up.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. And today is Thursday, May 30th, and thank you for getting your day started right here by making this your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Tyler Wojciak. I'm a Notre Dame alum and producer at Fox Sports, and this show is free and available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Quick reminder, if you're watching along on YouTube, please give the video a like and subscribe to the channel. Or if you're listening to the podcast, please rate the show 5 stars, leave a nice review if you like what you hear, and of course, subscribe. Loaded show for you today. I had the chance to talk with former Notre Dame captain and linebacker Mike Goolsby to talk about what he expects from the Irish this season, what he's most excited about, his biggest concerns, and a whole hell of a lot more. Mike played for the Irish from 2000 through 2004, and he has recently gotten into the Notre Dame media space over the past few years, and he does a ton of great work. So I really enjoyed this conversation. I hope you will as well. Check it out. All right, I'm joined now by a former Notre Dame captain, and he's the host of the Mike Goolsby Show for Blue and Gold. It's Mike Goolsby. I'm really excited to have you on, and there's a bunch of different things I want to ask you about today. But let's start with a big picture question about this year's team, and then you could take it from there. How would you describe your expectations for the Irish this year?
First thing that comes to mind, Tyler, it depends on the day. It depends on the day. So certain days I feel incredibly optimistic, and then others I feel a little bit skeptical. You're breaking in a lot of new personnel at a lot of different spots, at a lot of very important spots, namely offensive line. You've got a quarterback that, generically speaking, you're excited about in Riley Leonard, but then that's on one hand, and on the other, I'm a little worried about that ankle holding up, and I think that's fair. 3 seasons in a row, we've been tepidly excited about the wide receiver room, and I'm tepidly excited this year. So and then a defense, you're excited about Golden's scheme, and you're really, and we're going to probably get into this on the show today, but you're just thrilled to see some of this young talent, in particular at the linebacker spots, finally get on the field and really start to make some plays. So overall, I'm excited, and we'll know a lot more after week 1. How's that?
I agree. I think we're going to learn a lot in College Station, and it's a pretty difficult place to learn. It's going to be pretty loud, and there's going to be 100,000 plus screaming fans making it pretty difficult. But you're right. I do think we're going to learn a lot in that game. And I understand your point. Like, there's some good days and bad days. Take us through the good days when you're fantasizing about this season and all the good things that could come. Like, what's the best case scenario for this team?
I think a successful, can I label it that? We'll define this.
Yeah.
I think a successful season for the Irish this season is make a playoff, win a game. Are they a national championship caliber team? Maybe not yet, but as I look at it as a former captain player now in this media fan kind of role, man, Tyler, I just want us to be looked at as like a perennial top 5 to 8 team. That's where I want to see us. I think that kind of gives us a place to stand as a program, and then you build from there. Maybe you're one deuce night away from being a championship caliber team.
Yeah, I get your point. If there's one thing, I mean, I'm sure there's multiple things, but what is your biggest concern about this group that could prevent them from making the college football playoff?
On the offensive side of the ball, I already touched on it. Riley Leonard staying healthy. I mean, if they don't make the playoffs, Tyler, it'll be because Riley Leonard's ankle started acting up. I mean, I believe that. But beyond that, Coach Denbrock, had a great conversation with him over spring. He's a mismatch guy. That's kind of his MO, is to create mismatches. And as I look at the team now with Mitch Evans still coming back from an ACL, who are those mismatch guys? I feel confident in Jeremiah Love, extremely confident in him to create problems for a defense, but puts a big spotlight on Eli Raritan and an even bigger spot on that wide receiver room. Who are those guys that you can count on like a Michael Mayer on a third and obvious situation to go to him, and you can win that one-on-one mismatch that Coach Denbach hopefully can create for us.
Yeah, it's a lot easier creating mismatches when you have Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas on the outside. And even though this Notre Dame receiver room is much improved, it's not coming anywhere close to that. But the two names that you mentioned, I would consider are the biggest or have the most mismatch potential on Notre Dame. Jeremiah Love, especially now that he's been cross-training at the slot position. Like, if you get him on an outside linebacker on a route in the flat, like, that could be a 5-yard pass that turns into a huge gain. And I'm really excited about what Eli Raridon can do this year. Mitchell Evans is still going to be tight end 1, and Notre Dame is probably going to run more 11 personnel. But when Eli Raridon is out there, especially when he's on the field at the same time as Mitchell Evans, that's probably going to be a problem for defenses so long as he's healthy. I am surprised you didn't bring up the offensive tackles. Was that just a moment where you forgot about them, or you're actually not as concerned about them as most fans are, myself included?
I'm not. Concern is probably too strong of a word, Tyler. I'm optimistic about the talent. I mean, Tosh Baker was a top 50-ish recruit, and maybe I'm one of those guys that's just the plates at the table, Tosh, like, go take advantage of the opportunity. I still think Charles Jagasaw is playing out of position. I do think he's a guard and could be, a dominant guard. He had a rough go at the
Sorry to cut you off,
early.
but could you explain why? Because I think some people hear that, and I agree with you for the record. I do think that he's more of a guard, but what is it about his skill set, his technique, maybe it's his frame that makes him more suited to play guard as opposed to tackle?
And I talked to Charles at the spring. He prefers tackle over guard. But when I say I see a guard, when I see a guard in Jagasaw, yes, part of it's the physicality of just like his high school film. I mean, he was just throwing dudes out of the club, just a physically dominant player. So it's play style. It is frame. And I guess just like a heavier athlete, like when I think of like a left tackle, you don't think of like such a dense athlete, such as a large human being. You think of maybe just a little bit more of a dancer in terms of their feet. Left tackle, you're thinking about them kind of going backwards in pass pro. And when I think of Charles Jagasaw, I just think of a road grader. I think of him going forward. So I don't know if that makes sense to fans. But yeah, he's just a big dude with just a ton of just natural raw power. And I just feel like he'd be better served in a phone booth beating people up than working in space as a tackle.
I agree with you, and I think that's what made Joe Alt so special, because he was so light on his feet for someone who was a literal giant out there at 6'9", 320. And I think that if you gave truth serum to the Notre Dame coaching staff, they would all admit that, yeah, in an ideal world, Emil Wagner is probably the starting left tackle, because he does have the agility, he does have the footwork, but he's just not ready to play the left tackle position. He's also probably not as big as they want, but maybe that'll change. Like, I think, this time last year, what we thought the Notre Dame offensive line would look like ended up being drastically different than what they trotted out there in the first game. So there's still time for some things to change. But can I just jump in and just make a few more final thoughts? Absolutely.
Jagasaw had a rough spring. To start the spring game, Charles had a rough start, but he looked a lot better in the second half, which you love to see. Again, he's still a very raw player. And then I can remember breaking down Emil Wagner's film coming out of high school, and I'm like, that's an NFL. That's what a first rounder moves like. That's what a first rounder looks like. And I'm saying this semi tongue in cheek, Tyler. But if I'm Denbrock, if I'm Coach Freeman, if I'm Coach Rudolph, offensive line coach, like, I'm dangling that carrot in front of Emil's face. Maybe not a carrot, maybe a Snickers bar, Tyler. It's like, if you can get to 300, if you can get to 301, the job's yours, right? Whether it's left tackle or right tackle, it's just force the issue and you can make it happen.
Why are those 10 pounds so crucial?
Well, if we're talking about right tackle, for whatever reason, Tyler, right-handed quarterbacks, teams tend to run the ball, 60% of the time to the right versus the left, and just moving people. I played with a guy, Ryan Harris, who was Super Bowl champ, does a great job calling games for the Irish. And I want to say he started at left tackle as a true freshman, maybe the first to ever do it in decades and decades. But I want to say he was 269 pounds. That's 20 plus years ago, but you just want a little bit of lead in your booty, lead in your ass to be able to move people, especially on the right side. Left tackle, as good as Joe Alt was, almost impossible to get around, to get by. Was he quite dominant in the run game? I don't know. It's tough to do at 6'9" to get underneath people, to create that leverage, to create that movement, right? But and maybe it's a confidence thing too, bro. I'm over 300. I've arrived. I think there's an element of that as well.
Yeah, when I look at Emil Wagner and his size, and when it comes up a lot, I don't think it's like he's going to be able to hold up against Miami of Ohio. I have no doubt about that. But when you're going up against some of the top edge rushers in the country, all of a sudden, those extra 10 pounds mean a whole hell of a lot.
Yeah. Well, yes, I would agree. When you're talking about, and that's the way I look at, I love the player evaluation piece to this. I love breaking down position rooms. Do a lot of that on YouTube, do a lot of that on Patreon. But when I look at players, I look at it through what I call a championship lens. So you have to envision, if we're dominating a Northern Illinois, could we do this against a Georgia defensive line front that just has NFL guys stacked on top of one another? Those SEC dominant defensive lineman body types. You think about SEC talent at wide receiver. So that's how I'm always kind of I try to force myself to look at things. It looks great now, but in a higher stakes environment, the level of play, the intensity, the athleticism's ratcheted up. That's when we're really going to see the efforts of Marcus Freeman's recruiting pay off.
And to your point too about that, like when we evaluate the Notre Dame offensive line, we've been spoiled for the past several decades, really, with how many great offensive linemen have come through the program. So now you have guys like Tosh Baker, like Charles Jagasaw, like Emil Wagner, who probably could start at the vast majority of Power 4 programs in the country. But at Notre Dame, the expectation is a little bit higher. So your evaluation, your comparison to them is always going to be relative to that. And it's a little bit tougher for them, whether it's fair or not. But I'm glad to hear that you're a little bit more optimistic about the offensive line. I do want to ask you about the quarterback because, last year when Notre Dame added Sam Hartman in the transfer portal, you were a little bit more opposed to that move than most fans and people who cover the team. I think that's fair to say. But when the Irish added Riley Leonard, you're much more in favor of that decision. I actually remember seeing a tweet that you put out after you had finished watching Leonard's film, and you said that Irish fans are going to love him. Why are you more in favor of adding Leonard now compared to how you felt about Sam Hartman?
Riley Leonard as compared to Sam Hartman, I felt like Sam Hartman was a finished product. I never felt like he was an NFL prospect. I felt like the narrative where Sam's coming here to play in an NFL scheme, to develop for the NFL, I never bought that. I thought, as I said, semi-famously, I said I thought Notre Dame would do more for Sam Hartman than Sam Hartman would ever do for Notre Dame. And I think that's bared itself out to be true. But moving on to Riley Leonard, he's an athlete. And I believe, again, going back to talking about these high-stakes environments, these epic games, like an epic playoff game where if you're playing an LSU, right? If you're playing a Georgia that have NFL talent on the other side of the ball, stuff breaks down. It just does. At the college level, at the NFL level, as you say, they're on scholarship too. And there's going to come a point in time in a big time game where a quarterback needs to make some magic happen, similar to what you saw all last year with Jaden Daniels on his way to a Heisman Trophy. And I feel like Riley Leonard, with his athleticism, can get us out of trouble, especially if you're kind of breaking into new-ish tackles. That's one element of his game, whether it's CJ Carr, Kenny Minchie, Riley Leonard, Deuce Knight, all of them have a little bit of magic up their sleeve, right, in terms of like athleticism. In a way that we haven't seen from Notre Dame quarterbacks. So that's why I was a big Riley Leonard fan. I've also said he's an athlete playing quarterback. I still think he has a lot of improvement to be made at the position in terms of the nuances there. So, and then him having to learn Denbrock's scheme over the course of fall camp, it's going to be interesting.
It's definitely going to be interesting. And I'll admit, I've been a little bit skeptical about Riley Leonard dating back to last season when I was doing preview shows before Notre Dame played Duke. Like, I think part of it might have had to do with the fact that my introduction to Riley Leonard before really having watched that much of him when he was the quarterback at Duke was this potential NFL, like high NFL draft prospect. And then I saw him, I was like, I mean, look, he's an incredible athlete. He's huge. He can move. He's got the ability to shake off linebackers at the quarterback position, which is extremely rare. But then when I saw him throw, I was like, I mean, he's got a strong arm, but is it that accurate? And then something that really stood out to me when Notre Dame made the decision to add him way back in last December, and hearing Marcus Freeman talk about it and how he had asked the defensive staff, like, hey, how do you feel about Leonard? And when Al Golden was like, yeah, it was a hell of a job having to prepare for him, and they had to start that preparation way earlier in the summer just because he brings so many different things to the table. After hearing that, I felt a little bit better because Al Golden knows a little bit more about football than me. I think that's fair to say. So, when you were playing, how much more different was it to have to prepare for a dual threat quarterback, someone maybe not as big as Riley Leonard, because I think that's pretty rare, but when a quarterback has that ability to run, how much more difficult is that on the defense?
It's far more difficult. Think about it. It's the ultimate open field tackle, if you really just break it down. So it's like everything, we could be assignment correct. Shoot, we might even get home on a pass rush. Everybody's got everybody covered. And then boom, now we got to worry about this guy squirting out the middle, picking up 8 yards. So it's the ultimate trump card. And when you look at successful football teams, whether it's again at the college level or the NFL level, having an athlete back there, it's everything. It's everything. So, we just talked about this recently on a show going way back to 2002. We're ranked number 4 in the country. We beat Florida State in Tallahassee, had a great defense that year. And at the very end of the game, they roll out Adrian McPherson, who is a freak athlete. They roll him out the end of the third quarter, and it's like, you're 70 snaps into the game, you're tired, and then you've got to, again, try to make all these open field tackles against an elusive athlete. So it's the ultimate wild card. And something that you can prepare for it. You got somebody assigned to pull him up. But then even then, if you've got a Marist type spying him, that's a first-round pick. Marist is trying to tackle in the open field. It's incredibly difficult.
Right. And then you match Riley Leonard's athleticism, his elusiveness with his size. He's really tough to bring down in the open field. There was that play against Clemson last year where he basically just shook off 3 guys in his way to the end zone. So if he's able to do that for Notre Dame, I'm going to be all for him. I'm obviously going to be rooting for him, but he is not the only quarterback that you're high on. I know that you're high on Kenny Minchie. For the record, I am as well. I love the hashtag why not Kenny trend, by the way. And I think he has the perfect demeanor to be a good quarterback. I believe he has a really bright future in college football. I'm just not really sure how Kenny Minchie fits into the equation at Notre Dame, considering Leonard is clearly the guy this year, and then CJ Carr looked so impressive in spring ball that he might be ready to take over in 2025. Then you've got Steve Angeli, who's the older, more experienced one, and he's proven that he can play at this level. So how do you expect the quarterback situation to shake out over these next couple of years?
Well, we've got to be very careful with our words here, brother. So you said a couple things about CJ Carr, like looked good in the spring. I mean, did he? I don't know. How many reps did he get? Right?
True. What we were able to see in the spring, right?
For sure. And then, folks, there's nuance to all of this. There's nuance to all of it. I mean, you look at the rosters in the spring game. You look at when did CJ really find success in the spring game? Was he playing against walk-ons? Maybe. Go back and watch the tape. And then, as Steve's proven he can play it, it's like, well, has he? Has he? I mean, that bowl game scenario, they were down 7 coaches, down X number of starters. I don't know if that's a realistic snapshot of Steve's ability. And we can talk about experience. It's like, well, 1 game as a starter, does that technically it's more experience than the others? But the Kenny Minchie piece, I like CJ Carr. I like Kenny Minchie. I just don't know if Steve has enough athletic traits to get us out of a jam, to win us a big game, to make some magic happen, as I had talked about prior to. But I started that why not Kenny trend because I know he's the fastest quarterback we have on the roster, and I do think he has the most arm talent. And for whatever reason, he's kind of left out of, like, when fans look at the quarterback room, he's always the odd man out. And it's like, well, why can't Steve transfer? Why can't CJ Carr transfer? I just thought it was unfair that everybody looked at Kenny as the odd man out. And I do believe CJ Carr is going to be propped up as he's been during their spring by, legacy Notre Dame media. I mean, I believe that. His first day out of practice, Tyler, the first spring practice, there was a headline that was like, CJ Carr's command of the offense. Give me a break. Give me a break. So Denbrock likes Kenny. Denbrock told me Kenny reminds him most of Jaden Daniels in terms of the current QBs in the room. I think Kenny's got to, if he wants to elevate himself and surpass a Steve Angeli, some of that's going to be like intangible stuff, confidence, leadership, really go ahead and grab hold of it.
Okay, I think you raised a bunch of fair points there. First of all, I knew Kenny was an athlete. I did not realize just how good of an athlete he was until he ran for, I think it was 5 first downs in the spring game. Like, he really showed off his legs in that one, and I thought that was really impressive. And I agree that, that when I say experience, I just mean experience in the room. And for a while there, I had talked about Kenny Minchey, like before the spring practice had started. I thought, okay, I think what's going to end up happening, Riley Leonard is going to solidify his spot at QB1 in the same way that Sam Hartman did that last year. And even though there was a quarterback competition between him and Buckner, then Buckner transferred out. I thought Steve Angeli would transfer out, and then that would leave Kenny Minchey as the backup. And then as I looked at it next season, when everyone was sort of anointing CJ Carr to be QB1 in 2025, I looked at all the other young quarterbacks that I watched last year in college football, especially some highly touted ones who started as a redshirt freshman, and frankly, they sucked. Like, look at Drew Aller at Penn State. That's a little harsh, but he was a 5-star talent. Penn State was like, he's our guy. He's going to take over this offense, and he really struggled. And don't get me wrong, he has a ton of talent as well, but I mean, I feel like now more than ever, experience is so vital in college football. So I could see a situation in which Kenny Minchey is the starter next year, and he's probably, or he certainly would have a case to be the most deserving.
Listen, I like CJ Carr and I like Kenny Minchey. Part of me is rooting for Kenny Minchey because, again, he's been positioned or sort of framed as the odd man out. And I'm just saying, I believe he has the most arm talent. Yes, he still has room to develop. All of these kids do. When I watch CJ Carr play, it's a lot more clinical, but I think that Kenny, again, might have a little bit more spontaneity and could just add that element to the game, which sometimes, as I've said many, many times over many, many years, in big game, you need it. So it's a great room nonetheless. I'm very curious to see if Riley does re-aggravate that ankle and you do roll Steve Angeli in. He's going to beat we've got a nice schedule. He's going to beat the teams we should beat, but how does he fare against the Florida State? That's going to be really interesting. So it's just one more storyline to carry us through the offseason, Tyler.
Right. And the point I was making earlier about how we were evaluating the offensive linemen based on extremely high expectations, I think it's the complete opposite with the quarterback. So when you're reading that headline that CJ Carr is great command of the offense, I think that's in comparison to a lot of the other quarterbacks who have come through Notre Dame who have had absolutely zero command of the offense. And I do think that plays a part in the evaluation of CJ Carr. Like, I'm sure he's been impressive. He's done a lot better than most of the freshman quarterbacks from Notre Dame. But then again, that's a pretty low bar. But I still think that CJ Carr is going to have a really good future because it seems like he has his head in the right place and he does have the talent to go along with it. Is that how you feel about him as well?
Absolutely. You can kid, but I mean, think about CJ's heritage. I mean, he was watching film in the womb. So I expect him to have a clinical approach and be able to dissect the defense based off of his heritage. But who has a higher ceiling? I just think that maybe a Kenny Minchie does over CJ Carr. So it's like similar to how I felt about Tyler Buckner. I always thought he was a special kid, uniquely talented, uber competitive. He just needs reps. So whether you see a CJ Carr, he's going to make some boneheaded plays. If you see a Kenny Minchie, they're going to make boneheaded plays. If it's a Deuce Knight, he's going to do some stupid stuff out there as they continue to develop. And it's just, how do you approach it? Do you want upside or do you want a conservative approach? I think the better your defense is, the more you swing for upside. That's just my personal take.
We'll be right back with Mike to talk about what he expects from the Notre Dame defense this season. But before we get to that, I wanted to tell you about Gametime. Gametime is an authorized ticket marketplace of the NBA, which makes getting playoff tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to the tip-off. And with great last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. There's only a few more NBA games left this season. We got maybe one or a few more games in the Western Conference Finals, and then the NBA Finals. And Gametime is the home for your NBA playoff tickets. Gametime is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. You can view the view from your seat on your phone before you buy, but my favorite thing about Gametime is the pricing shows you your total cost up front, and you can buy tickets in a matter of seconds with just 2 taps. Gametime is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. You can see the view from your seat on your phone before you buy, but my favorite thing about Gametime is the pricing shows your total cost up front, and you can buy tickets in seconds with just 2 taps. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, we've talked a lot about the offense. Let's switch it over to the defense. And to me, I think the linebackers are the most interesting position group on the roster. They've got a really solid veteran in Jack Kaiser and a ton of young, exciting players to play alongside him. And each one brings different things to the table. You played linebacker. You understand the position inside and out. So I'm excited to get your take on this. Can you explain some of the pros and the cons to rotating guys at different spots at linebacker like Notre Dame is going to have to do this season compared to having 2 guys out there who never come off the field like they've had the past couple of years?
The pro to rotating is just fresh legs. And another pro would be development, live game reps. And this schedule sets up for us where you can roll. Shoot, you might be able to roll 3 deep in some of these games when you look at the slate of games. The negative to playing a Marist and a JD every single snap is fatigue over the course of the season. That's a very real thing. As somebody that kind of did that back in my playing years. And then the lack of development is a con. So when those guys leave, you're starting over versus you didn't give anybody but behind them time to run. So it'll be interesting to see how Golden Scheme shakes out. I think he's going to be able to, we'll talk about this, I'm sure, follow-up questions, but different skill sets for different players. Tyler, there's so many bodies in that linebacker room for 2 spots. So you've got to figure out what can these kids do and then put them in obvious game scenarios to let them pin their ears back and do what they do best.
I mean, you basically led me right into it. Let's talk about Al Golden's scheme, because last year I thought that Al Golden was able to make up for the lack of a truly dominant pass rusher, even though Notre Dame had a very good defensive line. They didn't have like a Justin Tuck coming off the edge who, it doesn't matter what you throw at him, he's going to get after the quarterback. I thought he was able to make up for that by implementing really complex blitz packages. The opposing quarterback never knew where the blitz was coming from, and it's obviously easier to do that when you've got guys like J.D. Bertrand and Marist Liufau who basically got a doctorate in football, and they can understand how to disguise those blitzes, and you can try a bunch of different stuff. It's a little bit harder to do when you've got a Drake Bowen out there or Kingston Viliamu-Asa, Jaden Osbury, or even Jalen Sneed. I just think that it's going to be really interesting to see how he's able to continue to implement complex schemes with guys who just haven't played as much. So what do you expect to see different from Al Golden this year now that he's got a rotating cast of linebackers?
Frankly, who knows? Because year 1 to year 2, I mean, it's shifted. It's shifted. So, and that when I go back to packages, whereas if I have a Drake Bowen or if I have a KBA, I can't expect them to have 3 years of experiential wisdom or 4 years or 5 years like a JD had. So it's like, KBA, I need you to learn this package. Drake, I need you to learn this package. Jaden Osbury, I need you to learn this package, right? And then you can kind of plug them in situationally. And then Jack Kaiser, he's your room mother, right? I mean, he's a jack of all trades. I think you could put Jack in at Mike on a third and obvious passing down with a Jalen Sneed at will. You could do a lot with those two, coverage-wise, blitzing-wise, et cetera. And then in a more of a mix down, you could slide Jack over to Will, and he can help a KBA or a Drake Bowen get lined up versus like a 12 personnel look. I don't know what the scheme's going to look like, but I do think that the defense is going to have to score some points this year. I think that's the next evolution for a Golden, is to be intentional about turning the ball over. And then I do think, Tyler, with this crop of kids, and I love JD, he's just small. I loved him, but he's just a little bit on the smaller side. More dynamic, bigger athletes. So I think you might see a few more plays, overall tackles for loss, splash plays, havoc type plays from the linebacker group this year than we have seen in a like, when's the last time you saw one of our linebackers get their hands on a pass? I think that's going to change.
Are you concerned at all about Jack Kaiser playing inside more frequently? Because there was a game last year, I'm trying to blank, I think it was Pittsburgh, when J.D. Bertrand didn't play much at all, so then they moved J.D. Bertrand inside, and it was one of his worst games of the season. Now, it's obviously a lot different when you're just sort of plugged into the position for one game in the middle of the season when that's not really your natural position, compared to this upcoming season when he has the full off season to prepare, put on weight if he has to, and he's getting all of his reps there. Are you concerned about that at all?
Yes. I think so what's fun about going back for the spring is they'll have like an ex-player, current player dinner, and it's a networking thing for all things 40 for 40. Tremendous opportunity for somebody like me who, trains athletes on the weekends as well to really get a chance to eyeball these kids. I love it. Jack, I don't care what he weighs, Tyler. He's smaller than Drake Bowen. He's smaller than KBA. They might weigh the same on the scale, but he's a smaller human being. He just is. In the way that like J.D. Bertrand might have been 235, he's much smaller than KBA is in terms of frame, et cetera. In that bowl game, Jack Kaiser did not look comfortable moving amongst the trees, right? He's more accustomed to being a space player, and he's a little bit small. But like when the offensive linemen got their hands on him at the second level, he was very uncomfortable. He was very uncomfortable. So that might be a situation where, depending how it plays out, because we need him to help young kids get lined up. But Marist's first year back after the dislocated ankle, Tyler, Marist couldn't read anything on the fly. He couldn't diagnose plays. So Golden just kept sending him. I'm not going to wait for Marist to read it. You just go blitz, 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 blitz. So you might see that with a Kaiser. He's always been an effective blitzer. So maybe we just don't leave him to his own devices to read a play out.
Golden definitely sent him. I think Marist thought he was sending him directly into the offensive tackle, running full speed every single time, because he didn't seem like he wanted to shit off a block that often. But that's a little bit mean. All right, let's talk about Kingston Viliamu-Asa, because I remember when he committed, you said that you could see him starting at Mike linebacker during his freshman season. I live out here in Los Angeles. The way that people talk about him and what he did at St. John Bosco, they're like, he's one of the best players to come through Southern California in a really long time. So the hype train is going at full speed right now, but still, it's very rare for a freshman to start at the Mike. What do you see in him, in his game and his film, that separates him from just being like a really good linebacker prospect to someone who can be really special and make an immediate impact? I
think first and foremost, mindset. Forget all the physical gifts, the God-given traits that he has. I think the mindset, and he's another young man that I got a chance to chat with 5 minutes at the spring dinner thing. Stoic, Tyler. A lot of eye contact, very stoic, very dialed in, especially for being such a young kid in a room like that. I came away very impressed with just his overall demeanor, presence, stuff like a guy like me, stuff like that matters. But then when you talk about playing the actual Mike position, bro, you can't do it a lot better. I'm just saying the overall feel for the game, you really can't. I mean, maybe you wish he was like a quarter step faster or something like that, but tackle to tackle, just the movement skills. He bends really, really well. He closes really, really well on outside runs. And Drake Bowen's a great player in his own right. I just think KBA has a little bit more just natural like hip mobility and just like a better feel for the game. I mean, yeah, I would fully anticipate a KBA starting, fully anticipate it.
I'm just thinking about how crazy it would be if Notre Dame ran out a true freshman starting Mike linebacker against Texas A&M. And the thing is, it's not like Drake Bowen has a ton of experience either. I just think that the thought is so foreign to me. I would need to see it to believe it.
Well, a kid like KBA, I mean, the league that he came from in Cali, he's been playing in big games like this. And, you know, that's something that fans, I don't know if they'll ever fully grasp, right? How could they? But like a kid like KBA, going back to the stoicism, Tyler, and just his overall demeanor, he's not going to be shook by that. He won't. I can promise you. And to him, like when he gets in there and it's, you know, first snap of the game, he's not thinking. The players don't think about the 100,000 people during the game. If anything, the more noise you hear, the quieter it becomes. As somebody that's, you know, played in some of those games. Doesn't bother me at all. I just worry about if I did have a concern, it would just be holding up with the workload. He's still a freshman in college. He's traveling, film, all of that. Can he hold up over the course of the season?
How do you feel about the secondary? Because I feel like Cam Hart had such a spectacular season last year. He was actually a little bit underrated, and then he really impressed the Senior Bowl activities and all of that. Now Notre Dame is going to have a new starting corner. It's going to either be Christian Gray or Jaden Mickey to go alongside Benjamin Morrison, who I believe is the best player on the team and will likely be a first-round draft pick next year so long as he's healthy. Then on the back end, you've got Xavier Watts, who just won the award for the nation's best defensive player, but he's even admitted that there's a lot of things that he can improve in his game. So the loss of Cam Hart stings, but I think we're going to see an even better version of Xavier Watts, a better version of Benjamin Morrison, and I feel good enough about Rod Hurd. So how do you feel about that group?
Well, let's go backwards to front. Is it Rob Hurd or Rod Hurd?
I think it's Rod with a D.
I'm not so sure he's going to be your starting safety. And that's one of those scenarios where, like, I am pulling so hard for an Adon Schuler, right? So it's just one of these things where it's like, oh, Bo Collins is transferring in. He's your starting wide receiver. Okay. Says who, right? Says who? Who was the kid that we had a couple years ago that was an All-American from Northwestern, came over? Brandon Joseph. You know, was he very good for us? And he was an All-American. So I'm pulling for Adon Schuler. I love the group. I absolutely think Christian Gray is going to be the guy opposite Benjamin Morrison. I saw a few clips in the spring of Jaden Mickey, and I just didn't quite see like the foot speed that I wanted to. And I don't think he quite has the length that we've kind of become accustomed to in a Cam Hart, Benjamin Morrison. But back to what I was saying earlier about making plays. I just want to see more turnovers from those guys. And my only thought about Benjamin Morrison is just say your prayers that he's healthy and ready for the Texas A&M game, because I don't know if that's a guarantee either.
Yeah, shoulder surgeries are definitely not something to mess around with, and they have a tendency to linger, which definitely concerns me. But yeah, if he's healthy, he's going to be phenomenal. Interested to your point about Rod Hurd, because I agree with you. I thought Brendan Joseph was a bit of a disappointment. I mean, we all saw the play he made in the Big Ten championship against Ohio State that I think we were sort of blinded by that, and we didn't recognize there were some clear flaws in his game. I just think with Hurd, he has played so much football. He's played dating back to 2021. He started pretty much every game over the past 3 years. So even if he's not like an elite playmaker, I think the coaching staff is going to feel comfortable with him back there, especially to go along with Xavier Watts, who can go out there and make plays. But it'll be a really interesting year for this group because, yeah, go ahead.
Just a counterpoint, mix it up a little bit. You know who else played a lot of football for us at safety, Tyler?
Don't say it.
DJ Brown.
Yeah. I still have nightmares about his draft.
So
those aren't going away.
There you go. And, and again, I mean, DJ was a really good player for us, but just, missed. You could see athletically how limited he was. Unfortunately, he's like sometimes in the biggest moments, like there's that one-on-one, Golden's drawing that defense up. You got to make that tackle in the alley, and he wouldn't. And I'm just telling you, there's something about the way Adon Schuler carries himself, and I think that's going to be quite the competition battle in the spring. And then I go back to like a Jack Kaiser scenario with these young kids at the linebacker position. Even if Adon Schuler's back there and he doesn't have the experience that Hurd does coming over from Northwestern, Xavier can help get him lined up, right? So these kids need reps to get experience. So, and I thought too that Hurd might have been brought in to create a little bit of competition at nickel too, because that's such an important position in Golden's defense. I'm like, I don't know if that's written in pencil or etched in stone that he's playing safety, but I haven't heard that anywhere else. It's just like he does have nickel experience as well.
Speaking of nickel, are you sold on Jordan Clark? Because I saw what he did last year. You look at the stats, none of it is particularly great. And I know that the Notre Dame coaching staff is telling everyone who will listen that he was playing hurt all of last year. And I'm not dismissing that, because obviously if you're playing hurt and you're playing seriously hurt, you're not going to be as good of a player as you are when you're healthy. But I don't know. It's hard for me to just completely ignore it. And we've also been kind of spoiled the last two seasons at nickel with Tariq Bracy playing at his full potential, and then Thomas Harper last year.
Yeah, Bracy, Harper, great players. And, dude, boy, did they play hard, right? And that's that nickel spot. You got to have run support. You got to be able to blitz, and you are on an island. You have no sideline help in terms of like an extra defender kind of thing. It's a very, very difficult position to play. I'm optimistic as long as the kid plays hard, because a lot's going to be asked of him. And yes, we have been spoiled the last 2 years. There's whispers that they're trying out Osbury at nickel. I don't see that. I think that's unfair to the kid, but maybe that's a thing where they're trying to keep him engaged and try to keep him happy, get him reps during practice. But that's one of those things I'll just kind of wait and see, Tyler, to be frank.
All right, I'll ask one recruiting question. Who is the player you're most excited about in the class of 2025?
Probably Dallas Golden, and I feel like that's an obvious answer. Maybe even a lazy answer.
He's mine too.
I think there's
I think Deuce Knight would probably be the lazy one. That's too easy.
Well, okay. Deuce Knight is the answer. Deuce Knight is the answer in terms of most excited. I think he could be the most important recruit that we've had in many, many, many years. I mean, I think he's like first pick overall type talent. I mean, just we see what he does, the high jump, long jump, the speed, the arm talent, left-handed. He's different. But the intrigue with Dallas Golden being listed and recruited as a quarter, that element of intrigue, I think it kind of makes it exciting. So I'm like, am I missing something? Anybody watch him play offense?
Yeah, I think you and I are on the same page here. He needs to have the ball in his hands. Yeah.
Bro, I can't wrap my mind around it. Like, we're putting him at corner, especially with, you just got a Mark Zachary. I mean, that corner room is already pretty sharp, pretty dialed in. We need a lot more help at the wide receiver room, in my opinion.
I'm fine with him playing DB the majority of the time, but he's too good of an athlete to not at least get some reps on offense. And look, I want to make this comparison. I also want to make it clear that I don't think that Colorado used him perfectly, but like Travis Hunter showed that it is possible to play both ways. Now, they played him way too much on both sides of the ball, but you can pick your spots there and create mismatches. And I think that Dallas Golden has that elite athleticism where he might not have to train that much at offense to still be a factor when he's out there. So I'm agree with you. I do think that they'll at least put him back there on like kickoffs and punts.
We can only hope. We can only hope. It would beat Matt Salerno, absolutely.
Or John Goodman. He was good at fair catching. All right,
Sure.
I've got 5 rapid-fire questions. The great Craig Kilborn started this, then Ryan Russillo stole it, and now I'm stealing it. So, first one. Was there ever a point in 2002 when you and the rest of the guys on defense decided, or at least realized, that not only did you have to prevent the other team from scoring, you were also largely responsible for putting points up on the board because the offense was so inept?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there was a point maybe a third of the way through the season where there was true dissension between the offense and the defense. Like, come on, guys. That was absolutely a thing, but it became just one of those things where it's like, if the offense turned the ball over, we punted for, the 7th, 8th time in a game. It's like you relish the opportunity to go back out in the field because it was a kind of a point of pride.
That was a crazy season. There was definitely a point, I think it was like 3 or 4 games in, where if you combine the defense and the special teams, because that's back when Vontaze Duff was scoring touchdowns as a punt returner, you guys were actually outscoring the offense. And it was pretty deep into the season.
Look it up, Tyler. Look it up, but I don't think we scored a touchdown for 3 games.
It's true.
First 3 games, we didn't score a touchdown. And then ended up being the 4th-ranked team in the country. Go figure.
Okay, best player you played with and against.
That's so tough because I'm going to leave somebody out. Can I say my favorite player I played with?
Yeah.
Derek Curry, co-captain, linebacker. I give him so much credit for any success that I had there. Couldn't have done it without him. Love him to this day. Derek Curry's my favorite player. Not going to say best. The best player I ever played against, probably Reggie Bush.
He was all right. Okay. Manti Te'o or Jalen Smith? Who was better?
Can you define better, Tyler?
Well, that's you. You're the linebacker expert. Who would you rather have on your defense?
Both.
Oh,
I will say this. I thought that Manti Te'o's impact at Notre Dame, it was like nothing I'd ever seen before. Holistically, he was such an important player for us. But I've also seen Jalen Smith do stuff as a true freshman. As a true freshman playing linebacker, I'm like, nobody taught that kid that. So, you talk about being uniquely gifted athletically. Jalen Smith gets the nod there. It's funny I said Jalen Sneed. It's a Freudian slip. But in terms of just impact to the program, I give the nod to Manti.
Okay. What was the coolest road environment you played in?
2004 Tennessee Volunteers.
I figured you'd say that.
I've talked about this many, many times on the podcast. I have a September birthday, Tyler. So I was a 13-year-old freshman in high school. I was a 17-year-old freshman at Notre Dame. We make our schedules years in advance. I thought I was going to redshirt just because of my age. I didn't. I was one of the 3 freshmen to letter. But I had that game circled like 5 years in advance, right? And then I end up redshirting my senior year, a bunch of shoulder injuries. And so I finally got to play in that game. Not to say that I manifested that or anything, but I legitimately had that game scheduled, or it's like circled coming out of high school when I committed to play for the Irish. But incredible. Another fun story. When I was with the Dallas Cowboys, they had a 2nd-round pick, Kevin Burnett, linebacker, 2-time captain for the Volunteers, great player. He was told by his center at that game it was so loud that the ball was shaking on the ground. Believe that if you want. That's what he told me.
I believe it, man. I've been to a game at Tennessee. I've said it before on this show. I've been fortunate to go to a bunch of different college football stadiums through work, and I went to Tennessee. I was a senior in high school. They were playing South Carolina. It was a top 10 game. This is back when Jadeveon Clowney was there. They had the checkerboarded crowd, coolest college football atmosphere I've been to, and it's really not even close. I really hope that Notre Dame goes back there one day because it is just such a cool place. Okay, I do have one more question for you before we let you go. Let's go back in time to your playing days. You just won a big game at home. Where could we expect to find a young Mike Goolsby celebrating the win? And for all the podcast listeners, I would like to point out that Mike is wearing a Linebacker Lounge sweatshirt, so he might already be giving away the answer.
Back to being young, I didn't turn 21 until my senior year of college. So a lot of dorm parties back in the day, Tyler. A lot of dorm parties, bro. But no, we would hit up the boat club. Was a ton of fun back in the day. We went to CJ's Pub often. You know, Ricky Joe, the proprietor, he's since passed away. R.I.P. Ricky Joe. He was very good to us, the players at the time. But yeah, I didn't venture into the linebacker until I reached alumni status, if we're being honest about it. But no, they're very gracious every time I go in there.
I was also not a linebacker person until after I graduated. Now, every single time that I go back, I always make a point to go to the linebacker. But I'm glad that you said CJ's, because I was definitely more of a CJ's guy back when I was a student. But Mike, this has been a lot of fun. I kept you longer than I expected. But before we wrap things up, please feel free to promote all of your different outlets so people know where to find you.
Yeah, so doing the YouTube show with Singer, I'll always do that. Very gracious for Singer bringing me into this thing. Started filming it 4 years ago off of my cell phone, right? We've come a long way, folks. So the Mike Goolsby Show, you can find it on YouTube. And then I partnered up with John Kelly of Always Irish fame. And he and I are on Patreon. So it's a little bit more unfiltered. It's a great dynamic ex-player, fan guy. A lot of fun, a lot of actually like legitimate entertainment value. So this season, we're going to be doing film breakdown with ex-players. Is going to be fun. And some live chat features. We're getting away from that super chat model. You know, if you subscribe to the Patreon, Monday Night Raw, we're calling it, it's wide open chat, open Q&A. So it's been a ton of fun. Thanks for all those that have signed up. And you can, if you follow me on Twitter at Mike Goolsby 41, there's a link in there to subscribe. Should be a good, fun season for us.
Yeah, be sure to check out all of Mike's work. He does a ton of stuff. As you can see from today's show, he's got plenty of insight and happy to share it. Mike, I really appreciate your time. I'd love to do it again once we get closer to the season. And take care, man. This has been great.
Thanks, Tyler.
That's a wrap for this episode. Thanks again for making Locked On Irish your first listen of the day. Considering this was such a long episode, it basically acted as two, so it's going to be the last one this week. I will be back next week at the beginning of June to get ready for an absolutely pivotal month of recruiting for the Irish, and I'll have plenty more content coming your way all summer long. Just remember to subscribe to the show on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts to stay up to date with every new episode, and give us a follow on social media. The X account is at Locked On Irish. The Instagram is at Locked On Irish Pod. And my personal X account is at Tyler, WOJCIAK. Have a great weekend, everybody. I'll see you next week.